I am not perfect, and neither is this van. As much as I hate to admit it, mistakes were made in the building of this van. So I've just fucked that up. We have a problem. Definitely made a mistake. I did actually make a pretty big stuff up disaster. It was a bit of a fail. I messed up. So in this episode, I'm going to go through all the mistakes that were made during the building of this van and the things that I would change next time round. If you've been following along with the van build series on this van, you probably want to watch this to see what things I would change in case you would like to do the same. All right, let's jump into it. So this van is heavy, which is fine as it's still under the legal weight limit, but with weight comes extra costs in fuel and you're upgrading your suspension, which is all fine if you have the money and you want to do it like that. But there are definitely a couple of ways I could have saved a little bit of weight in this conversion. And the biggest weight saver that springs to mind would probably be my pine paneling on the walls. So the whole walls of the van are covered with 12mm pine tongue and groove paneling. And although it doesn't seem like a lot of weight when you pick one up, when you add the amount that you actually need for something like this, it does add up. If I were to build this van again, I would have used a much thinner plywood based wall, and the reasoning is that you will never tell the difference if you do it correctly, and you can get tongue and groove style plywood. And if you can't, you can always go down the path of routing in your own V-groove to get that look. I think you would save quite a lot of weight doing it like this, and putting up the walls might even be a little bit easier, as getting these pine panelings to line up, especially around the corners, can actually be quite tricky. It's definitely something to keep in mind if you're doing something like this. The pull-out deck, it is really cool, I have to admit it, and it is one of the features I really wanted to install in the van when I first started thinking about the design. It looks really cool, but do we really use it enough for the space it takes and the weight? Probably not. It gets used maybe like once or twice a month. It is really cool to show people and the design ingenuity that kind of went into it, but it does take up quite a little bit of space under the garage here, and the added extra weight, not just of the deck, but the plywood sheet that I had to run over the top of it to create a false floor, it does add up. And as much as I hate to say it, if I built this van again, I probably wouldn't be putting this deck in. We probably use the rooftop deck a lot more than we do this one. If you really just want one or the other, I would probably choose a rooftop deck. So this is one I've definitely mentioned before, and it was the biggest pet peeve I had when I was building this van, and that was changing the front passenger seat to a single passenger seat from this double seat. I went through a massive rigmarole of trying to source a single passenger seat, so I built this walkway and everything around being able to fit a single passenger seat. Turns out legalities got in the way. It was more or less impossible to find a single passenger seat with the airbag on the correct side. Putting a driver's seat on this side wouldn't work because the airbag would have been on the other side, wouldn't have been legal, and an engineer would have never certified it. It's still quite functional, as I've taken out the armrest out of this seat so I can come back and forth quite readily. It's good for us because we're kind of young and we still have the mobility and stuff to kind of squeeze through these tight little spots, but for some it might not be as functional, so it's definitely something to consider before you design your van if you want to have a partition and be able to get from the back to the front with this double passenger seat. So this is our 65 litre compressor fridge from Bushman's. It is so quiet. It has an ultra low energy consumption of something like 2.5 amps when it's running, but it is just not big enough for our needs. I've been in the van solo now for the last 1.5 months as Vendi is off in Europe visiting family, and for a single person it is fine. It holds enough food for about 1.5 weeks, but with 2 people it's just probably not big enough. You end up going to the supermarket quite a lot more often, and if you want to be going on extended camping trips somewhere where there's not a lot of food, or if you're going into smaller towns where the grocery shops are a little bit more expensive and you want to stock up, a fridge this size is probably not enough. The other issue with these fridges is the size of the freezer. They're just so small. We love our smoothie bowls and smoothies in the morning, so we mostly store frozen berries in here, and the max you can probably store is about 2 packets, which isn't really enough. It doesn't last you very long. But a design like this in a small space is all about compromises. Putting a bigger fridge in here will reduce this drawer size and maybe even eliminate one of them, which I didn't want to do, so this fridge still suits us. The way I would solve this problem though in a future build would be installing a permanent freezer in the back of the van. So that would be in the form of a chest fridge style 12-volt compressor fridge, the size of about 30 to 40 litres, where we can have it as a dedicated freezer for frozen berries, ice creams, and frozen meals if we overcook something, which would be so good to have it in the back. I would install it on its own drawer runners so it would be easy to pull out, and then we would just restock this freezer with the essentials from the back, and I think it would solve the problem nicely. So we spent a lot of time at this office setup working opposite each other on our computers, and obviously computers need to be charged. So where do you charge them from? I've installed power points and USB sockets in certain spots around the van, but when you think about it, long cords are really annoying and I can't stand them. I would much rather a short run of cords to somewhere really close so they don't get in the way of each other. So the way I normally charge my laptop is with this cupboard. There's a power socket in here and I just run it up with my cord through here. When Vendy sits there, there's a cord in the way, it's fine, it's not the biggest issue, but when you get up, the cords start getting tangled and everything. So what would I do differently? I would install power points and USB ports in places that are really close to where you're going to be charging something. I know it sounds really obvious, but when you're thinking about where you're putting stuff, you're like, I'll put it on the wall, I'll put it here, I'll put it there. Put it really close to where you will be charging your items. If I was to design this van again, I would probably put a power socket either underneath or on top of the table here, so I could easily just plug it in with a short cord, and then we wouldn't have this issue of cords running around the whole van over the top of each other when we're both working in a space like this. So the one thing I did want to talk to you about in this video was the sponsor, which is us. saltyvanventures.com. So saltyvanventures.com is the website we built where you can get all the resources that may help you to build your van. You can get the 3D models for this van and both our Hiaces from Chile and New Zealand, as well as our super detailed electrical and plumbing diagram, complete cost breakdown, so that is in epic detail down to the screw. All the products we've put into this van, there's links there, and our most exciting thing is our Vanbuild consulting service. So it's getting quite popular. We are basically helping anyone build their van at any stage of their build. We'll help you do your electrical diagram, models, layouts, basically anything you need help with, we can help you with. There's packages for everyone. Go check out the website, saltyvanventures.com. So something I think that is becoming more and more important these days is having your lights in your roof and around your van dimmable. That's going to make your life a lot easier, especially if you're stealth camping, because you don't want to light your van up like a Christmas tree in the middle of the street, trying to convince everyone that there's no one inside. It doesn't matter how good your blackout blinds are, they can always release a little bit of light, and the dimmer those lights are, the less chance anyone's going to spot you stealth camping somewhere. These are our light switches. I haven't installed an inline dimmer for our roof lights, basically because I couldn't find a design that I liked. The ones I could find online didn't really suit my aesthetics for this kind of display, so I didn't end up putting one in. I probably would now, and I probably wouldn't care about the looks just from the amount of times we would have used it. These lights are quite bright, which is really amazing when you want bright light. But when you want, say, mood lighting or a slightly dimmer light, the only way we do it now is by opening our overhead cabinets and using the LED strip lights from the cabinets to illuminate the van in a dull light at night time when we're stealth camping. As an engineer, that annoys the hell out of me. I would really prefer a solution that was permanent, that wasn't an ad hoc solution that involves utilizing something that it's not made for. That's basically against my engineering religion. So I would probably next time install a dimmer switch into the wall to dim the overhead lights. Okay, picture this. You've just been to the beach, you've gone for a surf, you've got a wet pair of board shorts or a wet wetsuit. How do you hang it up and dry it? The cop-out version is hang it over the wing mirror, something like that. It'll dry eventually. But the engineer in me says this is a cop-out solution and I'm not happy with it. I didn't design somewhere where we can dry wet clothes, doesn't matter how many clothes we have. I don't really have a good solution for it, and that bugs the hell out of me because it is actually quite a vital thing, especially when you're living in a van in a small space, and when things rain, you get a lot of wet stuff and you're gonna want to dry it. I have rigged line inside the van, but that is definitely not a good solution either. If I was to do this again, I would incorporate a washing line into the roof rack that would come out through the cross members, and then I could tie a string to it, very similar to our New Zealand van where I had it built into the roof rack. I loved that design. It works so well. We could hang wetsuits, we could hang a whole load of washing off that. Because it's outside in the sun and it is quite high up, it gets a lot of wind, it dries so quick. It's definitely something I would look at if I was to design this roof rack again. So yeah. So one thing I definitely made a mistake on when building this van was how I treated the pine timber that I put in there. A lot of the paneling I bought was actually pre-primed, and that's what I would definitely recommend at this point in time if you were going to be building a van, because you can buy the raw pine or you can buy the pre-primed pine. So the mistake I made was not treating the raw pine correctly. Pine resin will actually seep through paint, especially around the knots. So every bit of timber I painted, I did undercoat, but I did not use the correct undercoat. Okay, I've just put the first coat on of my undercoat. If you don't use the correct undercoat, what you get are these kind of brown stains all over the wood, and it's really noticeable on the white wood. It's where the resin is actually seeping through the undercoated paint, and doesn't matter how many times you try and paint it over, it'll just keep coming. So to solve that problem, you need to paint it with a undercoat which is specifically got a stain blocker in there. So a stain blocker will prevent these resin stains from penetrating through and really ruining your aesthetics of the van. So what I'm going to do is paint this stain blocker on the knots everywhere where it's come through, and then just repaint over the top of it with the top coat, hiding all these knot stains everywhere. So in a bit of an ironic twist of trying to save weight in the conversion, I made these overhead cabinet doors quite thin. I made the frame by stripping down 2x4s into 10mm thick pieces, and then made the frame array and glued 7mm plywood onto the back. What's been my downfall in this, it was quite tricky to join the 10mm frame together to get a really strong bond, because what happens is these gas struts put quite a lot of bit of pressure on the hinge and push one side higher than the other, which actually puts quite a lot of stress on the corners here, and they have started to crack just because I couldn't get the joint strong enough. What I would probably do different next time would be make the frames a little bit thicker, so maybe I could put a dowel or a biscuit in that joint to make it a little bit stronger, so essentially the whole cupboard door wouldn't flex so much when the gas strut pushes on one side. Alright guys, I hope this video was insightful for you to get a bit of an understanding about the things I would probably change if I were to design this van again. If you like this video and you want to show a bit of free appreciation, all you have to do is just like the video, and if you want to put a little bit of icing on the cake, subscribe to the channel to see more videos like this. Also, I'm loving the comments you guys are leaving about my shirt. In touch with the common man. I think I am quite in touch living in a van, but I will consider getting a out of touch with the common van t-shirt just for you guys. All right, so until then, I'll see you next time.